you cannot multiply by anything that has a variable in it. So I cannot multiply by x plus 5. The reason is, in an inequality, if you multiply by a negative, what happens to the inequality symbol? It flips. Do you know if x plus 5 is positive or negative? No. So I wouldn't know whether or not to flip my sign. So in these inequality problems, you can never multiply by a variable. So that's the first problem. We're not going to be able to just get rid of our fractions like before. Now, what we can do, our goal is going to be to set it up the way this problem starts, with the fraction on one side and the 0 on the other. You're going to get a positive number if you take a positive divided by a positive, or a positive divided by, or a negative divided by a negative. So we have to find out essentially when both of these things are positive or they're both negative. To do that, we are going to make, let's call it a sign line. We're going to kind of look at a graph. Remember when we looked at quadratic inequalities, we would use the graph to help us. That's essentially what we're going to do here. What makes the top of this fraction 0? 3. So I'm going to plot a 3 on here. What makes the bottom 0? Negative 5. So those are the two numbers I'm going to put. Make sure you go small to large, so negative 5 is on the left. Now, let's talk about, these are the things that make the 0. Go ahead and graph this on your calculator. We're going to talk about a couple different ways to get our answer. So I want you to do x minus 3 divided by x plus 5. Alright, now this graph we can tell. Sometimes you can't. But you can tell from this graph, is the first section positive or negative? Is it above or below the x-axis? It's above, it's positive. The second section, is it above or below the x-axis? Below, so that would be negative. Okay, after 3, is it above or below? It's above again. Just barely, but it's above. Do you guys see that? Okay, so there are two ways to get this. You can use the graph. Sometimes the graphs confuse people because of the asymptotes and they have a hard time telling. The other option is a little more algebraic, and it involves really just plugging in numbers and seeing what happens.
I have a question. So if our first graph was like a negative and then a positive 2, you have to put another negative and a positive? If like it changes?
These points, those are the only places it will change between.
Okay.
These points mark where it's either 0 or you have a vertical asymptote. So if it's changing somewhere else, you either have the wrong thing here or you plugged it in your calculator wrong. The other option, this is my personal preference, but I know a lot of you prefer the graph. I like to just plug in numbers. You pick test points. You pick a number smaller than negative 5, so maybe negative 6. You pick a number in between 3 and negative 5, so maybe 0. And then you pick a number bigger than 3. The idea is, since negative 5 and 3 are the only places where it can change, this section will either always positive or always negative. We just have to decide. So we pick a number, and we're just going to plug it in and see. Okay, I don't even care what the number is, just the positive or negative. Negative 6 minus 3 is negative. Negative 6 plus 5 is negative. If you divide negative divided by negative, you get, if I put in a 0, 0 minus 3 is negative, 0 0 plus 5 is positive. Negative divided by positive is negative. If I put in a 4, 4 minus 3 is positive. 4 plus 5 is positive. Positive divided by positive is positive. So you can either plug in the numbers and see, or look at the graph. We got the same thing either way. Now to write my answer, we have to look at our inequality. We wanted greater than, so that means positive. So I want these pieces. There is no equal to, so everything will be parentheses. So this is going forever in the negative direction, so it'll be negative infinity to negative 5, parenthesis, union, parenthesis, 3 to infinity. It means any number smaller than negative 5 or bigger than 3 would make this true. Questions there? Let's do it. This one is different because I have a 1 over here. You do want that to be a 0 when you start. Can I just multiply over my x plus 4? No. So what I have to do instead, I'm going to get these on the same side. My goal is to get a single fraction on one side and a 0 on the other. I've got my 0, now I have to turn these into a single fraction. This is like 1 over 1. In order to add or subtract fractions, what do we have to have? Common denominator. So I need x plus 4. So I'm going to multiply by x plus 4 on top and bottom. We've done common denominators before. It's been a little bit, but we've done them. So that would give me x plus 4 or x plus 4. What should I do with my minus? Distribute. Okay, so now we can put these together. 5 minus 4 is 1 minus x over x plus 4 greater than or equal to 0. Have I lost anyone?
Okay, so why did we have to distribute the negatives since we're not like multiplying?
Since we want to subtract, you have to subtract off that whole thing, so both terms. Okay, now we're ready for our sign line. So we need 2 points. What makes the top 0 and the bottom 0? What would make 1 minus x 0? 1. What about x plus 4? Okay, so the smaller one goes on the left, so I have my negative 4 and my 1. You can do test points, you can do the graphing calculator. For this one, I may work it out both ways, and then we can kind of narrow it down. So, give me a number smaller than negative 4.
Negative 5.
In between negative 4 and 1. And bigger than 1. If I put in a negative 5, 1 minus negative 5, that's positive, it's 1 plus 5. Negative 5 plus 4 is negative. A positive divided by a negative is, so this whole section is negative. If I put in 0, 1 minus 0 is positive. 0 plus 4 is positive. A positive divided by a positive is positive. If you put in a 2, 1 minus 2, 2 plus 4, negative divided by positive, is negative. I will tell you, most of the time these things will alternate signs. I want to say most, because there are cases where you might get the same sign twice in a row, but that usually happens if something is squared. So if your signs don't alternate, I would probably double check and make sure my work was correct. They don't have to, but about 90% of the time they are going to. Why don't we verify this on our graphing calculator? Go ahead and graph it and see if it matches up. So parenthesis 1 minus x over parenthesis x.
So what if like there was that -1 and it was just 5 on the top?
Then the top would never be 0. So in that case, we would have only had 1 point to put on this interval, and we would only have to check the 2 sides.
Will we ever have more than 2 points?
You could if like the top were quadratic, then the top would give you 2 and the bottom would give you 1. So you could have more than 2. All right, so if we look at this, the first section of the graph was negative below the x-axis. Then it was positive, and then it went negative again. So our graph does confirm what we worked out. Now we have to decide what answers we want. We said greater than or equal to. That means positive. Okay, here is a trick to this. Equal to means bracket, but if I write this, my answer is wrong. Does anyone know why that would be wrong?
Because you're only seeing those 2 points and not what's in the middle.
Well, technically, because I put the comma, it does include the ones in the middle. There's an issue with, it's actually the -4. Can you have a 0 on the bottom of your fraction? No. So even though it said equal to 0, that means bracket. What happens if I plug in a -4? You get 0 in the denominator, and that's undefined, isn't it? So the denominator always gets a parenthesis, no matter what. This -4, because it's on the denominator, I can't actually equal -4, so it gets a parenthesis. But the top of the fraction can be 0. So my 1 gets a bracket. Question 6. Do you guys see why that -4 got the parenthesis? Alright, we're just practicing these problems today. So let's do some work. Okay, first step will be what? Then what do we need? Right, this is like a 4 over 1. What do I need to multiply this by to get my common denominator? Okay, so if I run my 4 through. Bless you. Because of the subtraction, we need to distribute the negative. Combine like terms, so 3x minus 8x is -5x. 1 plus 12 is 13. Or 2x minus. Okay. From here, what do we do? Our line. Okay. I need to know what makes top and bottom equal to 0. So if you want -5x plus 13 to equal 0, 13 equals 5x, and you get 13/5. If I want to know what makes 2x minus 3 equal 0, we get 3 over 2. 13/5, that's like 2.6 if you put it in your calculator. 3 over 2 is 1.5, so 3 over 2 is smaller. Okay, and you're welcome to use those fractions, or those decimals, excuse me, if you prefer. Okay. Yes?
Would it be negatives?
I added my 5x over since it was negative. Do you guys like doing the test points or the calculator? Test points? Okay. Give me something smaller than 3/2 or 1.5. 1. Something in between 1.5 and 2.6. 1.7, or you could even just go with 2 if you prefer. Whatever's easiest. Bigger than 2.6? 3. Okay. We're going to plug those things in. If I put in a 1, negative 5 plus 13, that's positive. 2 times 1 would be 2 minus 3 is negative. Positive divided by negative?
Negative.
If you put in a 2, you get negative 10 plus 13, which is positive. 4 minus 3 is positive.
Positive.
That's positive. If you put in a 3, you get negative 15 plus 13, which is negative. 6 minus 3 is positive, and negative divided by positive is negative. You guys still have the option, check it real quick on your calculator if you like. A couple different ways to get your answer, and just make sure you're on the right track. So we said it went negative, positive, negative. Does your graph match that? Yeah. Below, above, below. So that matches. Okay. We wanted less than 0. Less than means negatives. There's no equal to, so do I have to worry about what gets a bracket and what doesn't? No, but there's no equal to, everything's parentheses. So it will be negative infinity to 3 over 2 union 13 over 5 to infinity. One thing I want to caution you on with these test points, make sure when you go to write your interval, you use the actual 3 over 2, not your test point. Accidentally, I'll have some people sometimes see their 1 from their test point and write that in their interval. That's why the only 2 I actually plot on my number line are what makes top and bottom 0. The other numbers I just write above, just so I don't confuse myself. How are we doing with these?
Good.
Good. Let's get this one. First step.
Subtract your 1 over 2 times over.
Mm-hmm. From here, what would we do? Subtract 7 minus 1 gives me 6 over x plus 2. So we didn't even have to do the work of getting the common denominator. It just happened for us. So now, what makes the top 0?
Nothing.
Nothing, so we don't have to worry about it. What makes the bottom 0? Okay, if we do our test points, what's smaller than negative 2? Bigger than negative 2?
0.
So if you plug in negative 3, 6 is positive no matter what. Negative 3 plus 2 is negative. Positive divided by a negative? You put in a 0. 6 is still positive. 0 plus 2 is positive. So this section is, which ones did I want? Greater than or equal to. Equal to means bracket. Can I put a bracket on my negative 2? No. So I want the positive, so it would be parentheses, negative 2, comma, infinity.
But we can bracket. No, we can't bracket that.
No, infinity is always parentheses. Questions? Okay. I've got a couple more examples. Do you guys think we need 2 more? Do you think we just need 1 more? 1? We doing okay? I think I want to do this one. So this will be our example E then. Okay. I already have the 5 over, but what do we need to do? Common denominator. This is like a 5 over 1, so what are you going to multiply it by? Okay, so if I multiply by 3x plus 4 on top and bottom, that would give me a 15x plus 20 over 3x plus 4.
Negative like terms.
I'll distribute my negative to make that a little bit easier, and then combine our like terms. So 2x minus 15x is negative 13x. Negative 1 minus 20 is negative 21. So then that's over our 3x plus 4. Yes?
Why would the 20 be negative? Because it's almost negative 5.
Okay, if you took negative 5 times 3, it's negative 15. Negative 5 times 4 is negative 20.
Wait, no. Wait.
I had 19.
Yeah, that's what I did.
Too, but I changed it when you.
I have a feeling, okay. So we had this, we multiplied by 3x plus 4 on top and bottom, right? If you multiplied your negative 5 through and got negative 15 minus 20, then this negative is already gone. I just distributed a positive 5, which is then why I had to come back and write my negative through afterwards. Okay, if we set top and bottom equal to 0, bless you. The top, if you add over your 21, yeah, it's not pretty. Yep. And this, you get a negative 4/3. To decide which one's smaller, you could use your calculator and get a decimal to kind of help you. Negative 21 over 13, that's about a negative 1.6. Negative 4/3 is about a negative 1.3, so this has to go first. Okay.
I got 19. We just talked about that.
That's what we were talking about. Test points. If I put in something smaller than negative 21 over 13.
Negative 2.
Negative 2.
Oh, no.
All right, now in between we're going to have to be a little more careful. This was a negative 1.6 and that's a negative 1.3.
1.4. Negative 1.4.
Okay. Bigger, let's just go 0. Or 17, that works too. Alright, if I put in a -2, I get 26 minus 21, so positive. -6 plus 4 is negative, so that is negative. If I put in a -1.4, I'm probably going to need to grab my calculator to... So if I put that in the top, I get a -2.8. If I put it in the bottom, I get a -0.2. Negative divided by negative is positive. If you do 0, you get -21 over positive 4. So that is negative. Yes?
Does it matter when we put in our test points?
You have to put them into, when you put the test points in, do them the final inequality before you simplify, or before you set them equal to 0. We wanted less than 0, which is negatives, no equal to, so we don't have to worry about brackets. So this would be -infinity to -21/13 union -4/3 to infinity. Question 6. What I want to do is give you guys some time to work on homework so you can ask questions if you need it. There is a Math Excel. There's not very many questions on this, I think 5 or 6 maybe. So you have plenty of time to work and get help if you need.